I mean, it's very common to see things pop up post-accident.
Okay, I am going to take that entire segment and I'm going to put it into like a YouTube clip that I can just forward to adjusters anytime I hear that. So that way I don't have to sit there and explain the same thing to them over and over. And you have more authority on that front than I do anyway.
Do it. Please do it. I'm happy to. That's, again, I work plaintiff side for a reason.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 41 of the Driven Crowd podcast. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, I'm joined by Kelsey Salmon, RN. Kelsey is the owner and founder of Entrust Legal Nurse Consulting. She's been a legal nurse consultant for 6 years, focusing on reviewing personal injury, medical malpractice, and products liability cases. As a legal nurse consultant, Kelsey reviews medical records and creates client summaries. She works exclusively with the the plaintiffs' attorneys, as her passion is to help plaintiffs get the justice they deserve. Kelsey, welcome to the Driven Crowd podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. So I have been kind of newly introduced to the world of legal nurse consulting. Like we were talking pre-show, we had one in-house at the defense firm I was at years ago. And on the plaintiff side, they were out there and we've used them before. But since being on LinkedIn, I had no idea how many legal nurse consultants were out there. So this is definitely a growing industry, I would assume. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of legal nurses out there. I think a big part of it, honestly, is nurse burnout. I think that they decide, I want to do something different. I want my own business. I want to work for myself. I don't want to work for hospital administration, all of those things. And then there's a lot of people that actually have a huge passion for the law side of things. So they combine their legal passion and their nursing passion and create a legal nurse consulting business. So it's really nice to see. I like to see all of the different specialties out there. I'm sure you see it. I'm sure you're connected with plenty of legal nurses whenever they're educating on birth injuries and stuff like that. I'm not an L&D nurse, so I'm always really intrigued to read those. And I like to see the education behind it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's different professions and different fields out there that just seem to really push people towards the entrepreneurial side of things, right? And it seems like a lot of those are your more bureaucratic businesses. And I don't know that there's anything more bureaucratic than having to work through a hospital. And, I know obviously spending quite a bit of time in hospitals with the kidney transplant, the nurses would spend, 30 seconds with me and 5 minutes at a computer describing what they just did. Yeah. That would absolutely drive me nuts if I was a nurse. And so what are some of the different things that either you experienced or your colleagues in the nursing field experience that lead to that burnout so quickly?
Oh, goodness. So this kind of goes with my background. I know we'll get to it in a bit, but I kind of got thrown into a charge nurse position 6 months as a baby. I mean, I was still a baby nurse. So 6 months into being a nurse, I was a charge nurse, and that kind of fell into my lap. They needed a charge nurse, so they were like, you're an RN, we need you there. We had other LVNs on the floor and stuff, but a charge nurse has to be an RN. So I just kind of got thrown into that role. I was happy to do it.
Is that like a manager, a charge nurse?
No. So a charge nurse is overseeing all the nurses on the floor, all the patients on the floor. You're the go-to person if somebody has an issue. You're the one a lot of times communicating with the physicians. You make rounds with them. You're staying updated on each and every patient. You're helping the nurses if they need help. You could kind of call it managerial into a sense, but you're kind of the head nurse on the floor. I guess you could say it like that.
At 6 months. Yeah,
6 months. I had 3 months of orientation and 3 months by myself. And at 6 months, I was thrown into be a charge nurse. And so
wow,
just a lot comes with that. And I enjoyed doing it. I've always had like that leader type feeling. So it was fine for me. I felt confident in it, but also I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I still don't know everything. So I felt like I always was having to, reach out to other nurses and ask them questions. And it was just a lot, and always asking to pick up shifts. And, that just kind of keeps rolling into things. There's never enough time for your patients. It depends on the day and how many patients you have. Sometimes you have 4 to 5, 6 at the most. That's really pushing it. Those days were terrible. I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot maybe to the average person, but you're having to round on these patients hourly, give them meds, do any type of care, lots of wound care. If you're giving tube feedings, if you're doing, bed baths and, turning the patients, you're doing so much all the time. And then you're having to chart hourly. And it's so much. And a lot of times administration wouldn't listen to you when you'd say, I have too many patients. This is unsafe. I cannot take care of these critical patients I have over here while tending to these other patients that need pain medication every 2 hours. You're constantly being pulled in a million directions, and there's not enough of you. And then you have to still sit down and chart. There was one situation, I was, again, a charge nurse. I was on night shift at the time, and I had no nurses from my floor with me. It was all people that got floated up to the unit from other floors. So I was having to oversee them. I had patients of my own, and we were getting admission after admission. I literally never got to sit down to chart that entire night. So after my shift finished, I had to sit down and chart everything that happened. And I was there for hours charting everything. That was still at the beginning, but the burnout just gets worse and worse. They expect you to do all these things and be present and give your patients the best care possible while asking you to do a million other things. It's a lot. I feel that they don't really listen to you. They're like, here's a pizza party. Thank you for all you do. But they don't really listen to things that need to change.
And by the way, you're too busy to sit down and eat your pizza, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The amount of times I didn't eat on a shift is unreal. I would usually take like snack bars and stuff just so that I could eat on the go if I had to, so I didn't feel sick. But it's unreal. And I transitioned out in 2019, the beginning of 2019. So I missed the whole COVID thing, and oof. I felt so terrible for the nurses. It's a terrible situation all around, but the way they were treated is horrific, the things I've heard. So, that was a long story about burnout, but they just expect a lot of you, and you're there. You're constantly on your feet. You're constantly moving. There's just no time to even sit and think most times.
And given what I do for a living, that just sounds like if you were going to create a circumstance for mistakes to be made, like that's it. You have people taking care of too many clients who don't know each other, who aren't familiar with the protocols, and you work them to death, and then you have them chart after. Is that based on your memory? You're having to go back through a 12-hour shift and try to remember everything you did. And that's a recipe for disaster right there.
Yeah, and that's what makes us so helpful in medical and malpractice cases. We know what happens. We know what happens on a shift. We know a nurse may be stuck in another room for 2 hours with a critical patient, and their other patients are left, or they're not getting turned, or there's so many different things that could go on. It's really a sad situation how hospitals set nurses up to fail. And another thing is that they'll pay travel nurses hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they won't pay their staff very much, the core staff that's been there forever. And that's really sad as well.
Wow. All right. So let's back up a little bit. Tell us kind of where you're from and how you got into the nursing field to begin with.
Yeah, I'm from San Angelo, Texas. I still live here. I'm really close to my family, so I've never wanted to leave. My parents, I kind of want to start with the backstory with them. They both grew up really poor, honestly. My dad lived in a dirt shack. He showered outside. He made himself a promise when he was young that he was going to create a really good life for us, for his future kids. And he did that. He became an entrepreneur. Him and my mom have many businesses that are successful. And so I watched that my entire life, them just be awesome. I learned so much from them, and they're my best friends as well. So you'll hear me speak very highly of them. Anyway, so I get close to going to college. I don't know what I want to do. I know that I really enjoy helping people. I've always been that type of person. I see that you need help, I'm going to help you. I wish I could help everyone, but it's just not possible. So I thought maybe I should be a nurse. They help people all the time. So that's what I chose. And so I went through nursing school. My first job was on a trauma unit, like I said before, and we got patients that were post-accident most often. We got some surgical patients as well, but typically post-accident patients. So that's where my love for PI cases comes in, because I took care of those patients. So I worked on the trauma unit. Then that ended up merging into like a trauma med surg floor. They were doing construction at the hospital, so we moved into like all one unit. So lots of medical and surgical patients, and then we continued with the trauma patients. We got some high critical care patients as well. We could take ventilated patients and all of that good stuff. And then also connected to that med surg floor, it was a separate floor, but it was part of that unit was orthopedic. So lots of orthopedic surgeries, knee, hip, shoulders, anything orthopedic we took care of there. And I know I briefly mentioned this about the burnout, but I became a charge nurse really early on. So I had that experience as well as the bedside nursing experience, which just kind of led to feeling really led to want to start my own business. And again, I had been in a leadership role already at the hospital as a charge nurse. So branching out to start my own business was already in the back of my head for quite a while, watching my parents be entrepreneurs, already kind of feeling like I want to be doing something else while using my nursing skills. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. So I want to go back to kind of growing up with entrepreneurs. Watching your parents as you grew up, you already said that you were super close to them. Did you have that feeling that one day you wanted to have your own business, or did you kind of run from that and say, they have a crazy life, like I want something more stable, and nursing kind of fit that mold for you?
I feel that I couldn't think of at the time something I could do to help people. I wasn't ever just like thinking, ooh, I want to start my own business from a young age. I just knew I wanted to help people. I didn't feel that I wanted to run from entrepreneurship, because honestly, they balanced it extremely well. I mean, they were at all of my volleyball games. They were at every school function. I mean, I never had them miss out on anything, which is not the same story I've heard from other people with entrepreneurial parents. So I just always felt something pulling me, though, to be my own boss, I guess is the way I can describe it. I always felt, pulled that direction. And I think just from watching them, it kind of came naturally to me.
All right. So I don't think we can have a nurse on the podcast without, asking for some gruesome / crazy story. So what do you got for us?
Gosh, well, if you really want something gross, we had a surgeon that was, I don't want to say research, but we had a surgeon that had patients with really bad wounds that they couldn't get to heal up. And so they did maggot therapy for them. And yeah, it's nasty. You had to keep count of them. You had to make sure you didn't lose any. And occasionally we'd find some on the ground.
Keep count of the maggots?
Yeah. You had to keep track of them because they crawl off the bed onto the floor. You'd find them. It's really gross. That was one of my least favorite type of things to take care of.
I think there was like a House MD episode. A House, the old show House. I think they had something like that on one of those episodes, because I remember seeing that before.
Yeah. It's real life. It's a real thing, because it eats at all the bad tissue and keeps the tissue healthy. So it makes sense, but it's pretty nasty. I don't know if I have a whole lot of like gory stories to share. I took care of a lot of really bad auto accident patients. I had a lot that were like 18-wheeler accidents, and they were just hurt so badly. They had bad TBIs. They had a brain surgery. This isn't really a gross story, but a good story that I had a patient that I always wanted to take care of. He was in an 18-wheeler accident. He had a terrible TBI. He was comatose for a really long time. He had a trach. Anyways, he didn't interact with anyone. And I always was trying to talk with him and get him to interact with me, even just squeeze my hands, give me a smile, do anything. And as he started becoming more alert, he began to interact with me, and no one believed me because he wouldn't interact with anyone else. So I'd finally bring the nurse in and be like, watch, stand aside to where he doesn't know you're here, and he'll interact with me. And he did. And it was so neat. I feel like I had some patients that just have stuck with me forever that I wanted to keep taking care of, and, watch their stories and see them get better. But I know that's not a gross story, but that's a good story. He did end up getting better and going to rehab and doing well. But those things are just so rewarding, especially when their families have very little hope at the beginning.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and thank you for that, because that's not necessarily the most common way to approach clients like that. I mean, I know some absolutely amazing nurses, and I mean, I'm fully convinced God put them on this earth to fill that role. And then there's others who just aren't, right? They got into the profession and they realized, hey, this isn't for me, but I don't have anything else to do, so I'm just going to continue to do this. And that's really sad.
And they feel stuck.
Yeah, they feel stuck, right? And I don't think that's just limited to nurses. I'm sure there's doctors that are that way. I know there's lawyers that way, and a lot of different professionals. And so Absolutely. The floor that you were working on, it was not the emergency room. This is where you go if you get admitted from the emergency room. So emergency room, they make sure you're not going to die, and then they either send you home or send you up to a floor like where you were. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or they would go to ICU if they were super critical. Obviously, that's intensive care is a whole different ballgame. But we got a lot of post-trauma patients, and then the medical surgical, a lot of post-op surgical patients, or people that came in with an emergency and had to have surgery or medical emergencies and stuff, just all sorts of different stuff. I feel like I've seen all the things on that floor.
Sure. Yeah. And so, whenever we're talking with adjusters, insurance adjusters, a lot of times things that we hear are, well, they didn't even complain about that injury in the emergency room. Yes. And so tell us a little bit about why that might be. Why would somebody go into the emergency room and, maybe not complain of something that could be even major, maybe even like a broken bone? Why would they not be complaining of that in the emergency room?
I saw that very often. We would find broken bones, a week later because they didn't realize that they had that pain. So our bodies are meant to, react to the most critical thing. So the most painful thing. So that's where our brain goes. If like you had kind of briefly mentioned a bone sticking out of your arm or something, that's our mind's going to see that and be like, my arm's broken. That's what I'm worried about. They may have, fallen off of something and their leg may be broken as well. But they may not feel that at the time because their arm hurts so bad. So our brain shunts our pain nerves, I guess I should say, to react to that. So our adrenaline is also going. So our adrenaline protects us from feeling some other pain that we may have. So I saw very often where they would come in, their main issue may be a broken arm. So they'd image that. They didn't image the rest of the body if they didn't have any complaints or anything. And, days or a week later or something, they'd be like, my ribs hurt or this hurts. And we'd find rib fractures, we'd find an elbow fracture, we'd find shoulder issues. Like they'd have a tear in their shoulder. It just, the list goes on. And sometimes the same thing with like TBIs. They may not exhibit concussion symptoms immediately. Sometimes we would see, it is most common to see immediately, of course, but sometimes we would see a mild concussion kind of show symptoms over time, and that person was really debilitated, and they didn't expect that at first because they're attending to the worst issues first. So yeah, but It's sad. They do end up with stuff. And I've even seen clients and patients months later come back and say, I'm really having this pain right here. And they get an image. It may be like a broken elbow, and they didn't even know that they shattered their elbow at the time, especially if it's just like a small fracture, because everything else was in so much pain that's what their body was telling them was in pain. And until one, initially that adrenaline goes away, and two, some of those other things are healed, our body may not tell us that there's pain elsewhere, because our mind is so focused on the pain that we know is there. We know that's broken. That hurts the most. That's where our mind is at. So it's very common to find injuries later. I've even worked some cases where I've seen injuries pop up a year later that they didn't catch initially, a small neck issue or something that didn't show up initially. They didn't really have neck pain, so they didn't image the neck, but then they imaged the neck, and they have all these new issues. I mean, it's very common to see things pop up post-accident.
Okay, I am going to take that entire segment and I'm going to put it into like a YouTube clip that I can just forward to adjusters anytime I hear that. So that way I don't have to sit there and explain the same thing to them over and over. And you have more authority on that front than I do anyway.
Do it. Please do it. I'm happy to. That's, again, I work plaintiff side for a reason.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So you get into nursing. How long were you a nurse before you said, I'm out? This is for the birds?
5 years.
Okay.
I think about right. So I had already been feeling burnt out and everything. I had a little bit of health issues of my own. I ended up with mold toxicity, and I have no idea where that came from, but I was not feeling well. And then my grandma ended up passing away at the hospital I worked at. And unfortunately, they were negligent in her care and failed to diagnose many things for her. And she ended up passing away pretty quickly. And after that, after I came back from bereavement, I'm like, I don't think I can be here. Like, I didn't feel comfortable being there anymore. And I had already started my business. I was doing part-time work at the time. And I was like, you know what? God's got me. I feel very led. And he led me to say, I'm going to take the leap and do this full time. And I've been doing it full time ever since. So, yeah.
So growing up with two entrepreneurs, I'm sure you pick their brains all the time since starting your own business. What are some things that they have, I guess, what's some advice they've given you, or what are some problems you've gone with them that you thought they had some pretty insightful things to say?
Know your worth is probably the biggest one. They're like, we've hired so many people, and if they're good at what they do, we'll pay them what they deserve to be paid. So, be confident in yourself. Your attorneys will pay you what you deserve to be paid. And I'm one of those type of people that's probably too generous. I would probably, take a tiny amounts of money compared to everybody else around me, because that's just how I am. Like, I want to give to everybody. So they're like, make sure that you know your worth and stand up for yourself with that, and don't let yourself just kind of settle, I guess, is the best way to put that.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing, right? Because a lot of times entrepreneurs, they don't know their worth. Maybe it's they don't have a ton of experience, but they're really, really good. Yeah. Or maybe they feel like they can't charge what they're worth because they won't ever get any business because it's too expensive. And I think knowing that and being true to that is a huge, huge lesson. That's really good. What are some other things that issues you've faced or problems that you've solved through their help?
I've got to think about that, to be honest. I don't know. They've always just been super supportive. My husband as well. They've always pushed me to be my best self and to reach for the stars. Like, don't feel like you can't do something. Don't feel like you can't land this big firm because they have such a big name and you're just this one person. I don't know if that's the best answer to that, but I feel like they've just always pushed me. Don't give up. You can do this. You have a dream. Follow through. All of those cliche things, but that they are cliche because they are real life situations.
Yeah. Well, and I think that feeds into, a lot of entrepreneurs, their biggest adversary, right, is those limiting beliefs. And you got the advice from, your parents who were living it too. So you grew up in that culture where, anything is possible, and watch us do it, which I think is really, really cool. And so, as you kind of look back at yourself, especially when you first started your business, what are some limiting beliefs that you've identified in yourself, and what did you do to get around those?
It's a great question. I think just feeling, I was confident in my work because I feel that I honestly do a good job, and I listen to my attorney clients and to what they need. I don't just go off and do whatever I think they want. I make sure that I know what they want and get it done. I think just from being at the beginning to now, just building my confidence and building my work product into being what's best. I worked with a lot of attorneys, especially at the beginning, that taught me a lot, especially in like product liability cases. They taught me a lot of what was needed, what they needed as well. And I feel like it's just strengthened my work overall. And I think that experience is obviously really helpful in this field, knowing what people need and knowing what to look for and how to be quick and efficient. And I think that's another thing. When you're a brand new legal nurse, it takes you a little bit to get the whole record review process down, and probably takes a lot longer than an experienced legal nurse. And now I feel like I can go into the records, find exactly what I need, be quick and efficient, and just pull out all the facts, the good, bad, and ugly. And that's one thing too, if legal nurses are listening, just make sure that you don't always just focus on the good of a case. The attorneys need to know anything the defense is going to bring up, and they need to be prepared for it.
I will echo that. I will say that's probably more important than the good. Like, we're really good at finding the good stuff, right?
Yeah,
it's the bad stuff, and this looks really bad. Why? Like, what is this, something that we just got to own, or is this something that actually that can't be this way because of X, Y, or Z?
Absolutely.
Finding all that stuff is huge, and so. I think most entrepreneurs will start off, being able to do the work, right? They're leaving a law firm. They're a nurse who's been doing chronologies or whatever, or they're an engineer, architect, or whatever it is. You're building stuff. You can do the work. You were doing the work for someone else, and so now you have the work, which is a thing in and of itself, and then you also have the business owner part.
Yeah.
And I know for me, whenever I made that leap from doing the work to doing the work and owning a business, man, was there a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I would say the vast majority I didn't know. And so for you, what are a couple of the things that you figured out really quickly? Like, oh, wow, I know absolutely nothing about this, or I'm really bad at this.
Gosh, taxes.
Taxes, yes.
I don't like taxes. I am not a fan. And if it wasn't for my parents, I probably wouldn't know how to fill out half the forms. I call them, I'm like, what is this? What am I doing? And taxes is probably the entire worst thing about owning a business, to be honest. I would say time management.
Oh, yeah.
When I first started, man, I would work myself to death, and I loved it. So it didn't feel like work, but I would work so many hours, especially I was working a pretty big pharmaceutical litigation case, and there were so many clients. So I was just trying to get through them as fast as possible because they needed them quickly. So just finding that balance of like, don't work myself to death because I love what I do, and also taking care of myself, making sure I work out and eat well and hydrate and all those basic things. I feel that's kind of taken some time into balancing. And I have a almost 2-year-old son. He'll be 2 in February, and trying to balance, mom life and work life, and not working when I'm, playing with him because my phone's going off, or, just certain things. I feel like those are hard for me. And I feel like I'm getting better at it over time. So from when I started and didn't have any control over myself with hours I was working to now, I have set hours I work, and whenever I'm done working, I try to be done working, except if I get some emails and stuff I need to answer. But I would say that's probably been one of the biggest changes, but I'll always be bad at taxes. I'm not.
Well, you don't need to do the taxes. That's what you hire somebody else for eventually, right?
Oh, yeah. I do have a CPA that does it, but I don't like whenever I see that number that I owe.
Yeah. Well, welcome to entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah. It's
so
not fun.
I think the time management kind of grand umbrella is one of the pitfalls, or one of the things that most entrepreneurs kind of struggle with, right? At first, there's not enough hours in the day to work to do all of the things that I have to do because of all of the hats I wear. And then as you are able to start offloading many of those things and focusing on the things that you're really good at, it's like, okay, well, now how do I structure my days to get the most out of them where I can focus? / you have the business development aspect where you've got different meetings that you've got to go meet people and this, that, and the other. And I don't know that is ever going to go away, right? I think there's always going to be more things that you want to get done than you can. And there's always going to be that kind of inside your mind fight on the delegation part, right? Our ego's always telling us, hey, I'm the best at this. No one can do this as good as me. And we're wrong. That's not true.
I have control issues. Absolutely. I absolutely have control issues. I mean, even, sometimes I have to sub cases out if I'm working big pharmaceutical litigation cases and there's too much for me to do, or if it's a specialty that I'm unaware of, I sub some stuff out and I still get in those records and make sure nothing's missed because it's my name on it at the end of the day. And so I'm like, my control issues are good and bad. It's good for my clients because my work product will always be good, but it's bad for myself because I'll drive myself crazy. And sometimes talking about being a business owner, the little things that you don't even think about, answering emails and, responding to certain questions and stuff, those things are time consuming. And before you know it, you've spent 2 hours doing that and you're like, I still have to finish this case and it's going to take me, this many more hours. And you were kind of touching base on that. So I have a really hard time delegating things. I wish I was better, but I'm just not.
So a little while back, I think this was an idea of Charlie, my business coach. He was like, hey, track your hours like you used to when, you worked defense work. And that means like every 6 minutes, right? So yeah, that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons I'm on the plaintiff side too, is we don't have to do that because it is living your life in 6 minute increments is an awful way to live. But I went back and I did that. And one, reminded myself again why I never wanted to do that again. But two, I saw how unproductive my days were because I was getting distracted left and right. And I think honestly, that was the whole point of the exercise, right? Is I did not have time boundaries and I was allowing myself to be distracted. And I think a lot of that was because I like having the answers. I like being the go-to. I like not having to think for 4 hours straight. And I like the interruptions, right? Because it gives my brain a little reason to unfocus on whatever it is I'm working on. And so I still struggle with that. And in fact, I have a brand new executive assistant who is working on helping me set up my calendar to where I'm not able to do those things. So, but yeah, I think to your point, having all of those different things going on, unless they're planned, you're going to spin your wheels for a long, long time.
Absolutely. I get pulled away from things I'm working on all the time. An attorney has a question and an attorney's like, hey, can you quickly look at this? So I feel like my brain is like constantly going. And one thing I always say, I'm always happy to help. And that's like kind of my line. I really am truly always happy to help. I enjoy helping my attorney clients. I enjoy helping their clients. I enjoy helping these people get justice. So I don't know if it's a pitfall or not, like a strength and a weakness at the same time of just always wanting to help everyone. But yeah, I feel like I need to be better about time wise, but I think that's everyone. And I think that that's part of owning a business too. You hear people say like, you have to put in the time and the work into it to grow. And I feel that's kind of where my mind is at. And this is not a question you asked, but I feel like a weak point of myself, like being a business owner, is marketing. I hate bothering people. I hate to bother people. So, occasionally I'll send, thanks for connecting messages on LinkedIn. I've actually gotten like 3 or 4 clients via LinkedIn. So, but I try not to annoy people. A lot of people do like mass email marketing and do lots of follow-ups. And I think that's great. But for me, I sit there and I overthink it. I'm like, I'm bothering these people, so I don't want to bother them. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to help everyone. I want to offer my legal nurse services to them. I want to take some of their load off. Like you were saying, it's just so busy. So for me to be able to do the medical record reviews, which is time consuming, especially for an attorney that's being pulled 35 different ways, and then summarize it to all the facts they need, it's really ultimately saving them tons of time. And once my clients see that, they're always just like, I wish I had done this sooner. And so I'm always like, I want to help everyone I can help, but I can only do so much, and I limit myself with my fear of marketing. That's a big fear of mine. I don't like bothering people.
Yeah, marketing is a entire podcast series of its own. I always tell people this, like anytime I'm talking to maybe a younger law firm owner or someone else who owns a business or is just, in need of some marketing help, I always say, look, pick one thing.
Yeah.
Pick one thing that you enjoy and do it consistently, right? And then that's kind of your foundation that you're starting to build on. And then once you get that systematized, once you get that up and going, either you can hand it off maybe, or you can bring someone else in and then pick something else and do that consistently. And then you just kind of build this foundation and you go up and you up. And then as you grow, you can bring in more people to help you with those things. And then eventually, you're just doing the marketing things that you like. And so there you go. There's a little marketing advice from Scott, unsolicited, as most of my advice usually is.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for being on the show today. I always ask for top 3 books.
Oh gosh, I'm not a huge book reader. So
okay, all right, fair. What do you do? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you watch shows?
I do listen to podcasts. I'm a big show person because I feel like I'm so visual. This, it kind of goes one way, but I don't know if you read the Bible, but like the Chosen series, for instance, like,
oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's my favorite. I feel like I cry almost every episode, but it explains things so well for me. And again, I'm just so visual, so it sticks in my mind better. I feel that I'm such a fast reader that sometimes I have to like go back and reread. And that also is kind of what makes me efficient at medical record review, is I'm like a really fast reader. My husband's always like, did you read that? I'm like, yes, I read it. He's like,
yes, I scanned it very, very well.
I just read really fast. So honestly, this isn't probably not going to be part of what you post, but I mean, I read the Bible every day. That's my main book. I read books about Psalm 91. I feel like that's really, really speaks to me. And I don't read that much besides those things. And I do listen to podcasts. I feel like I kind of just hop around, though. I'm not super committed to one podcast. I'm kind of weird. I feel like everyone I see on LinkedIn is big readers, and I'm different, but
hey, break the mold. Be you, right? However you learn best. And to your point about The Chosen, yes, every time I do a Bible study or I'm listening to a sermon, I picture the characters and they look just like the ones in The Chosen. So anytime Peter's doing something or Simon's doing something in the Bible, I like have those characters in my mind from The Chosen.
Yes, it makes it so much easier for me to grasp, because they're so deep, and I again have to reread those sometimes too to really take it in. And so whenever I'm watching The Chosen, I'm like, okay, this is making more sense for me. I'm seeing it play out, and that's just how I've always been. I think I do a lot of reading too, doing all these medical record reviews. So by the time I'm done reading for the day, I'm like, I don't think I want to read anymore.
You're done. That's right. All right. Yeah. So for anyone out there who hasn't seen The Chosen, whether you're a Christian or not, believe or not, I would definitely recommend it. It's just an amazing show. So once again, Kelsey, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for all of those who have tuned in. We'll see you next time on the Driven Crowd podcast.